So now that we've discussed what people think about robots when they're not in their presence, how do you think people will react to robots when they come near them performing unknown tasks?
Well, that's exactly what we do here. And I just wanted to, before, describe what is the goal of this sub-project within the overall GCR project. And we are really focusing on these robot encounters, human robot encounters. And we're doing that because we believe, here on the right side, you can see an image, and down below we have robot encounters. Because believe that these studies, ultimately, they will inform larger organizations, nonprofits, compliance organizations, with this kind of large scale deployment and the data associated with it. And also on the right side, we also are hoping that these studies will inform, national, international, and governmental organizations that ultimately they will decide on some sort of compliance rules for companies and organizations to follow. But that said, we do envision a future where there is more and more of these spontaneous encounters of robots with people. And we are, I think, in the right moment in time to perform this study, right before we see more and more robots in our workplace, in our healthcare centers, in our cities as a whole. We found that it's critical to investigate how people perceive robots, how they feel about them, how their stress levels are, how safe they feel. And for that, we found that the only way is really to employ methods from the social sciences and also from the sort of the physiological analysis using biosignal sensors, and of course using methods from the data curation, databases, and so on and so forth. It's interesting that would be towards convergence, which is a key part of all of these multidisciplinary study that we have here. And then I wanted to briefly mention some of the challenges that we found, and one of them is to finding a common vocabulary. And our solution for the perceived safety survey approaches, sensing approaches, is to use this data modeling that it will be described in a second, right? That unites all of these different disciplines and make them searchable, interactive. We found that social scientists needed to learn things like robotics, and they needed to learn about physiological sensors, and that was challenging, and it was overcome by getting exposed to that and the willingness of these participants. And then we found that roboticists had a hard time to understand the survey method, the deductive, inductive focus on surveys and focus groups and so on. And finally, my final comment is that we had several surprising results, and maybe one of them is that what we thought that encounters are, which comes from the communication communities, and interaction, which comes from the engineering communities, are actually perceived differently, in that both of them, they have mutual awareness of the systems and humans, but interaction requires some level of exchange, share goal, define roles that people show, and also the physiological data demonstrated that this is the case. That said, I'm going to pass it to how are these scenarios studied? So please go ahead.
Yeah, well, we designed a study to investigate these types of indoor encounters between humans and robots, and it was independently reviewed and approved by the Institutional Review Board. And through that challenging IRB process, we really continued to modify the data through the data modeling process to really get a hold on the relationships between the data and the processes used to generate it. And so what you see here is a depiction of the experiment control variables and the session layout, where we had 24 total participants over 13 experimental sessions. And so here on the left, A through D, you can see the 4 robot behaviors. And on the right-hand side on E, you can see the experiment session layout. First, the participants sign consent before sensors are applied. And then after taking a pre-experiment questionnaire, the experimental portion of this study involves 8 robot encounters with a relaxing baseline before and after. And then after experiments, participants take part in a focus group discussion. So a key component of this study is the online collection of experimental data during encounters with robots. In particular, we synchronize data from robots, omnidirectional microphones, and 2 physiological sensors worn by participants. And can you tell us a little bit more about these sensors, Dr. Liu?
Yeah, sure, Ryan. So we try to monitor human mental stress during robot encounters, and we choose 2 different types of wearable sensors. One is called the electrodermal activity sensor, which is in a wristwatch form factor, and it measures the sweat on our wrist due to mental stress. The other one is a chest laminated wireless electrocardiogram wearable ETA2 that measures heart rate and heart rate variability continuously but imperceptibly.
Yeah, so from these sensors, as Dr. Lu mentioned, chest tattoo and the wristwatch, the goal was to decode acute stress levels over time as the participants went through the encounters with the robots. And in total, after a careful literature review, about 80 features relevant to acute stress were extracted from this data. Among which 2 of the top ranking features, which we call the principal features, were successfully associated with people's response to these robotic encounters. Now, particularly these 2 features that were relevant to the participants' acute stress levels were heart rate variability, entropy, and the number of EDA phasic activity peaks. So as shown on the slide, these principal features were shown to be elevated in certain types of robot encounter scenarios compared to others. And in conclusion, it showed that the average participant felt more stress during, well, first of all, encounters compared to just the baseline conditions, as well as encountering multiple robots compared to a single robot led to an elevated response. And also during navigation, encounters with navigating robots compared to robots that were on search behavior. So Emily, does this agree with what the participants say about what they felt during the encounters?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. When we conducted focus groups, we then generated transcripts in which we performed 2 types of social science data analysis. The first one was an inductive thematic analysis, and the second was a deductive content analysis. So let's talk about the thematic analysis results first. We identified 6 major themes using thematic analysis as depicted in the figure you'll see on the right. These themes included sense-making, interactions versus encounters, familiarity of participants with robot dogs, human impact on their perception, excitement and novelty, and future possibilities of robotics. So within this figure, you'll see a variety of arrows. These arrows represent relationships between the themes, and then we'll also see different various subcategories and codes that represent relationships between the deductive content analysis results. So between the content analysis results and the inductive thematic analysis themes, we contribute to a pre-existing taxonomy of perceived safety in human-robot interaction. We also make theoretical distinctions between human-robot encounters and human-robot interactions as depicted by the Venn diagram in the bottom right. The last thing that I'll note is we did have some differences shown between the physiological sensing data and the thematic inductive analysis results. So we found that participants typically described a difference between their experiences sitting in the isolated seatings versus the social settings. So people found that they had a more personal relationships with robots in the privacy seating. So how is all of this multimodal data organized and presented together?
Well, for this, we built a knowledge graph. A knowledge graph expresses the relationships between data, the people, the functions, tools, and processes. This is called data provenance, which enables contextualizing and accessing the data. And for this, we first created a data model, which is the underlying semantic representation of the whole study, of all the components of the study as a system of classes, corresponding descriptions and information, and the relationships between them. And we created a data dictionary, which is our now common vocabulary, a vocabulary that we all in different disciplines can understand and talk about and express the data through it. This knowledge graph is implemented in a graph database, so we can retrieve data to understand details of the research methods, discover convergent points, and facilitate ultimately our goal, transdisciplinary research. We also publish the data set in a data repository for others to reuse and as evidence of our work. Do you have any questions?
So where can I find the raw sensor data from session 3, trial 8?
Yeah, and can we find the dominant deductive themes by human subjects for that session as well?
Yeah, of course. I will show you how the database can be queried to find your answers in the video. So for those unfamiliar with the query language, we implemented a chatbot empowered by ChatGPT. We trained it using the data model schema and dictionary to ensure precise response and avoid hallucination. As shown in the video, we can find the path to the raw sensor data and a table with the deductive things and corresponding value counts.
So now that we've talked about how people encounter robots, let's take a look at some up close and reality scenarios of people encountering robots in different contexts.